Welcome to the ISSA's course on the exciting and often misunderstood world of bodybuilding. When the layperson thinks about the sport of bodybuilding, images of big, dumb men grunting and throwing weight around often come to mind. But this idea could not be further from the truth. As you read and work your way through this course, you will see that the serious bodybuilder, or his or her coach, is part athlete, part scientist, and part artist. This course is designed to help you understand everything that building a champion physique entails. Not only will this help you become more proficient in the art and science of bodybuilding, but also the information contained in these pages will help you become a better trainer for all types of people with varying goals. The human body consists of three types of muscle: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle includes the digestive tract. It protects blood vessels and is governed by the autonomic nervous system. Cardiac muscle, like smooth muscle, is modulated by the autonomic nervous system and includes the heart. Both smooth and cardiac muscle work involuntarily. Skeletal muscle, the muscle most gym goers are concerned about, blends into tendinous insertions that attach to bones, pulling them, which produces the desired movement. When the body moves, it activates a slew of muscles. The forces generated by the body internally must overcome the forces imposed on the body externally. Over time, consistent strength training will make cardiac muscles more efficient, enhance the function of smooth muscles, and make skeletal muscles stronger. Muscles are largely composed of proteins, which are hierarchically organized from large groups to small fibers. A muscle is a group of motor units surrounded by a membrane and physically separated from other groups of motor units by a membrane. Muscles are connected to bones through tendons. The muscle fiber is composed of myofibrils, which are small bundles of myofilaments. Myofilaments are the elements of muscle that actually shorten upon contraction and are made up of two types of proteins: actin and myosin. Two other important proteins composing myofibrils are troponin and tropomyosin. When the prime mover muscle contracts, the opposing muscle relaxes. An example of this is when the triceps contract, locking out a bench press. The biceps relaxes. Without this reciprocity, muscle actions would be weak and jerky at best. Training heavy and explosive enhances reciprocal innervation. This is a large part of the reason that trained strength athletes lift more than novices do. Contraction strength depends on the number of muscle fibers involved. The more, the stronger the contraction. The sliding filament theory states that myofibril contracts by the actin and myosin filaments sliding over each other. Chemical bonds and receptor sites on the myofilaments attract each other, allowing the contraction to be held until fatigue interferes. The alignment of muscle fibers has a distinct effect on the muscle's ability to generate force. Fusiform arrangements are when the muscle fibers are parallel to the tendons, allowing contraction at great speeds without a loss of force output. A unipennate muscle will have the fibers going from one side to the other in relation to the tendon. A bipennate muscle will have fibers on both sides of the muscles. In a multipennate muscle, the fiber bundles converge to several tendons. Unipennate, bipennate, and multipennate muscles can produce higher amounts of force than fusiform muscles can, but at the expense of contractile velocity. Fiber arrangement is largely determined by genetics, but it may be altered with training. There are three distinct types of muscle fibers, and the percentage of each type varies from individual to individual. Type 1 fibers, slow twitch or red muscle fibers, are highly resistant to fatigue, but have a low force output. Type 2A fibers are intermediate fibers that can produce a high amount of force for a long time. Type 2X fibers are fast twitch muscle fibers, often called couch potato fibers, because of their prevalence in sedentary individuals. These fibers are very strong, but have virtually no resistance to fatigue. Connective tissue joins muscles to bones and bones to bones. Connective tissue has fewer cells than other tissues do, and receives less blood and oxygen than other tissues do. Strength training has been shown to increase the size, strength, and resilience of connective tissue. Tendons connect muscle to bone and are slightly more pliable than ligaments are, but cannot shorten as muscles do. Ligaments connect bones to bones at a joint, along with collagen, and contain a somewhat elastic fiber called elastin. Ligaments have limited elasticity, enough to allow for joint movement. Cartilage is a firm, elastic white material. It is found in between ribs, at joint surfaces, between vertebral discs, and in the nose and ears. Between adjacent joints, cartilage provides a smooth surface and shock absorption in addition to lubricating the working parts of a joint. Cartilage has no blood supply of its own, and its only way to receive blood and nutrients is through synovial fluid. This lack of nutrients is why cartilage heals extremely slowly. The central nervous system, CNS, consists of your brain and spinal column. The CNS interprets messages and sends them back to your body. The peripheral nervous system, PNS, consists of the nerves and ganglia outside of the brain and column, and does two things. It relays messages from the CNS to the body, and from the body to the CNS. The CNS directly affects strength by sensing changes inside and outside your body, interpreting those changes, and responding by initiating action in the form of glandular secretion and muscle actions. When a nerve carries an impulse of sufficient magnitude down to the muscle cells that compose the motor unit, the myofibrils do the only thing they know how to do: contract or shorten. Myofibrils are fundamentalist in their functioning. They know nothing less than total contraction, as it responds with an all or none reaction. Thus, a crucial point to remember is that a motor unit is fully contracted or fully relaxed. This is why it is so important for strength athletes to practice the movements they will compete in. They become more skilled at the movement. In the same way, this is why it is important to perform various accessory movements, because you are not trying to gain proficiency in accessory movements. You are trying to target various movements to assist the competition movement. Not all motor units in a muscle will be activated in a movement. This is why bodybuilders practice muscle confusion, and why powerlifters must vary accessory work. This size principle of motor unit recruitment states that slow-twitch muscle fibers, with the fewest motor units, will be recruited before fast-twitch muscle fibers are, with the greatest number of motor units. This is why you are able to lift a fork slowly to your face without creating a bloody mess. As a muscle is stretched, the brain receives a message that tells a muscle to contract. The stretch reflex occurs when a rapidly stretched muscle stores elastic-like energy, which in turn produces a rapid contraction, such as during a counter-movement vertical jump. The stretch reflex essentially works as a rubber band does. Mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage are the three factors that induce muscle hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is the increase of the muscle's cross-sectional area. Muscles get bigger from myofibrillar hypertrophy. This is the contractile element of the muscle that increases with training with heavier weights and lower reps. The other element is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, accumulation of non-contractile matter, which is a vital element of bodybuilding, but not helpful to a strength athlete wishing to remain within a weight class. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is trained with higher rep pumping work. Box squats allow an athlete to go past this point because they put the stress on the hips, glutes, lower back, and hamstrings. Squats are the king when it comes to building muscle. Remember, people with larger amounts of muscle mass have higher metabolic rates. The more muscle one has, the more calories one burns, even at rest. Unfortunately, much misinformation about the squat has been circulated. Let's take a look at some of these squat myths. Squats will give you a broad butt. First off, my practical observation is that many folks squat without building large butts. Wide, intermediate, or narrow, it doesn't really make that much difference. Squats are bad for the knees. Think of the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. Calluses build up on the hands when you routinely pick up heavily knurled pig iron. The same concept applies to ligaments, tendons, and other connective tissues that thicken in response to the stress imposed upon the joints during weight training. Smith machine and leg presses are safer than free squats. Whether it's a Smith machine squat or leg press, regardless of the design, the apparatus has a preset motor pattern determined by the manufacturer. This motor pattern may not be ideal for your individual body type. Squats are bad for the heart. The heart, like every other muscle in the body, responds to stress by adapting to it. In time, the cardiovascular system is strengthened through weight training. This, of course, excludes those with pre-existing heart conditions, such as extreme hypertension. Squats are bad for the back. Dr. Robert Wolfe, in his iconic book, Bodybuilding 201, points out research has shown that squats, often criticized on the basis that they are bad for your back, could actually be doing your spine some good. The overhead press is performed by an athlete resting the bar on the shoulders in the front. Legs are locked and the back is straight. From the resting or rack position, the bar is lifted until the elbows are fully extended over the head, with the head all the way through. Although the overhead press is primarily a shoulder movement, it forces the entire body to work in concert. The athlete's legs and core stabilize the weight, and the shoulders and triceps press the weight up. Former World's Strongest Man winner and world record holder in powerlifting, Bill Kazmaier once said, "A strong back equals a strong man." I will take that a step further and say that a well-developed back equals a well-developed man. Chin-ups are performed with a supinated grip and are one of the best overall back developers. The bench press allows for the heaviest weight of any exercises to be handled, and it is a true strength builder. The bench press is a compound, multi-joint exercise that can benefit most bodybuilders. The incline bench press movement is used by bodybuilders to maximize the development of the upper clavicular portion of the chest. This is not just bro science. EMG studies have actually shown that the upper pectorals have higher levels of engagement than on a barbell bench press. The decline bench press is a favorite for overloading the lower, sternal portion of the chest. Like the incline or the flat bench, dumbbells can be used. Declines seem to be most effective at an angle of 20 to 25 degrees. It is safe to assume that the deadlift is the oldest strength training maneuver in existence. No real documentation exists to support this, but it makes perfect sense when considered. Bench presses and squats took ingenuity on the part of our iron game predecessors. However, nothing is more primordial than picking up an object and putting it down. Deadlift training, technique, and programming have been refined, but the primary objective remains the same. You pick up heavy pig iron, you put it down, and you grow. The deadlift is the ultimate back builder, but deadlifts also work nearly every muscle in your body. Because of the amount of motor units recruited, deadlifting, like squatting, is a catalyst for muscle growth. Deadlifting forces you to use virtually every muscle in your body to take the bar from the floor to waist height. In the chain of muscles involved in this process, nothing is left behind, and everything kicks in eventually. A variation of the deadlift is the partial deadlift. Partial deadlifts can be performed in a power rack or off boxes. If you have access to boxes, this is a more effective variation because the flex of the bar is more similar to that of a traditional deadlift, as the plates rest on boxes, as they do on the floor. This provides a similar feeling of bar flex at the commencement of the movement. Sometimes a partial deadlift will hit a sticking point. So even though you are lifting the weight less distance, you will not be able to handle as much weight as you would with a full range of motion deadlift. Another variation of the traditional deadlift is the sumo deadlift. Sumo deadlifts are more of a leverage lift than a true strength lift or muscle builder. Just because the movement requires a much shorter range of motion does not mean you will be able to lift more weight. A vast majority of powerlifting world records have been set using a conventional stance. As bodybuilders, we deadlift to gain muscle and to build our limit strength base. Sumo deadlifting is far down on the list of modalities to accomplish either. For bodybuilding, stick with the conventional deadlift. Many call bar dips the upper body squat. The reason is the massive amount of muscle they can pack on the upper body. Once an athlete is able to master his or her body weight on this exercise, it is not time to ditch because the intensity is too low. It's time to add weight. This can be done simply with a weighted dip belt that can cost as little as $20. The more muscle fibers that are used during an exercise, the greater the hormonal and remodeling response will be. Only the muscle fibers that are used during the resistance training are subject to adaptation. Thus, it is generally recommended to base your program around compound movements. Heavy compound lifts may prevent injuries because they stimulate new bone growth. So follow these guidelines when trying to stimulate bone growth. Do 3 to 6 sets with fewer than 10 repetitions. Make the rest period 1 to 4 minutes, using a typical periodization scheme designed to increase muscle hypertrophy and strength. The exercises should be compound movements. All of the previous exercises discussed would fall into this category. This concludes the Week 2 lecture. Next week, we'll discuss exercise selection and how and when bodybuilders can incorporate bands and chains into their training program. Compound movements, isolation movements, bands, chains, barbells, dumbbells, and machines. The options are numerous. Why not choose them all instead of limiting yourself to just one? Remember that mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage are the contributing factors to muscle hypertrophy. Muscle tension is the result as bar weight increases, assuming proper technique is used with a full range of motion. Increasing training weights is indispensable, but never at the expense of form. Metabolic stress caused by moderate repetition ranges has generally been shown optimal in achieving muscle hypertrophy. This range is typically in the 65 to 85% of a 1 repetition max, with repetitions ranging from 6 to 15. Compound exercises that involve multiple joints and multiple muscles have a much greater bang for their buck than single-joint isolation exercises do. Remember that compound exercises elicit a greater hormonal response and remodeling response than single-joint exercises do, thereby allowing greater muscle hypertrophy to occur. More mechanical work will lead to greater metabolic stresses, increased muscle tension, and more muscle damage. Mechanical work is simply the weight lifted, multiplied by the distance it is lifted, multiplied by the number of repetitions. Increased emphasis is being placed on lower body development in today's contests. Size, separation, and even striated glutes have become the norm in high-level contests. Research and in-the-trenches experience indicates that the following exercises are the top 10 for eliciting muscle hypertrophy in the lower body: squats, front and back; lunges; angled leg press; barbell hip thrusts; single leg cable kickbacks; glute ham raises; deadlift hyper; Romanian deadlift; leg curls; Leg extensions. Heavy bench presses are the go-to lift to develop massive pecs. The bench press allows you to lift more weight than any other free weight exercise does. This makes it the #1 exercise for developing size through chest. However, bodybuilders need more than one exercise for each muscle group in their repertoire. The following are the top 10 exercises for developing the chest: bench press, decline bench press, weighted dips, dumbbell incline press, floor press, bench press with weight releasers, dumbbell flies, Smith machine negative overload bench press, dumbbell pullovers. Bodybuilders need to perform direct arm work to develop big biceps and triceps. Not only does doing direct arm increase the size of the musculature of the arm, but also engaging in isolation work of the biceps and triceps improves strength of these muscles. Thus, if your biceps or triceps were limiting factors in upper body compound lifts, such as the bench press or row, improving strength of the biceps and triceps will help increase the amount of weight you can use in these compound exercises. The following are the top 10 exercises to develop the arms: JM press, Dick's press, close grip bench press, one-arm dumbbell triceps extension, the tri-tri set, cheat curls, incline dumbbell curls, reverse fat bar curls, one-arm eccentric barbell curls, Zotman curls. In most cases, for many beginners, the back is just an afterthought. The back can't be seen when you look in the mirror, and most people have a hard time contracting the back when they first start working out. So the majority of beginners do a few half-hearted sets of pull-downs and low cable rows and move on to something else. However, people who are serious about creating a great physique know that a thick, wide back is going to distinguish them from other competitors, athletes, and lifters. Furthermore, your back is just as important as the front of your body is when it comes to aesthetics, strength, power, and performance. The following are the top 10 exercises to develop your back: deadlift, bent over row, pull-up chin-up variations, chest-supported T-bar row eccentric overload, T-bar prison row, straight arm pull-down, rack pulls, one-arm dumbbell rows, lat pull-downs on your knees, seated cable rows. Developing the shoulders is crucial for building an aesthetically pleasing body. Furthermore, because the shoulder is essential to so many movements, it is important to keep the shoulders strong and injury-free. The following are the top 10 exercises to develop the shoulders: dumbbell military presses, Arnold presses, upright row, barbell shrugs, half-half full dumbbell presses, cable lateral raise, face pulls, bent over lateral raises, band pull-apart, handstand push-ups. By performing the previously discussed exercises, you will address your abs, calves, and neck indirectly. However, if muscle development in any one of these areas is lacking, or a lack of strength in these muscles is a limiting factor in other lifts, you may need to perform isolation work for the abs, calves, and/or neck. The following is a list of the top 10 exercises to develop the abs, calves, and neck: leg raises, planks, side planks, landmines, standing cable crunches, standing calf raises, seated calf raises on leg press, four-way neck machine, neck harness. In the early 1900s, Eugene Sandow, the founding father of bodybuilding, sold a home exercise device that used rubber resistance bands for strength training. Decades later, in the 1970s, elastic bands could be purchased and were marketed as a cheap, safe, and effective method for duplicating isokinetic resistance machines. Vershansky, Yuri Vershansky. Yuri Vershansky wrote about elastic bands in his 1977 book, Fundamentals of Special Strength Training in Sport, a truly classic masterpiece from the fabled Soviet bloc. By the late 1880s and early 1990s, powerlifting guru Louis Simmons was writing about adding bands and chains to barbells. But unknown to many, prior to Simmons' work, ISSA co-founder and world-renowned strength coach Dr. Fred Hatfield was already using bands with elite athletes in the early 1980s. Bands and chains have started popping up in gyms around the globe, similar to the way spandex did in the 1980s. The difference is, unlike spandex, bands and chains can actually help your workout. One study presented at the 2004 National Strength and Conditioning Association Convention demonstrated that athletes who did band-resisted bench presses had a significantly greater increase in their bench press max, as well as power produced, compared with athletes who trained only with straight bar weight. Hey, wait, this is all fine, but isn't this course about bodybuilding? Yes, it is. However, we must remember our limit strength is our base. A study performed by Ithaca College, Ithaca, New York, directly confirmed the anabolic effects via the implementation of band training. The study demonstrated that athletes combining bands with bench presses and squats had strength gains that were more than double those of their counterparts, who only used free weights without additional bands. The band group doubled the amount of muscle gained. Before incorporating bands and chains into a training program, you must understand how they work. Let's take the squat as an example. As the lifter squats the weight down and then back up to an erect starting position, the resistance from bands, chains decreases on the way down and increases on the way up. By how much depends on the strength of the bands or the weight of the chains. Chains feel much more like a barbell using straight weight than bands do. Chains perform almost like the missing link between band-resisted movements and movements that use traditional iron. Bands work similarly to chains. As leverage improves, resistance increases. Now, let's discuss how to safely set up bands so that they can be used during a variety of lifts. If you are squatting in a power rack, you have a couple of options. Set the safety pins at a low position and loop the bands around them and attach them to the barbell. Or loop the bands around the bottom of the safety rack. Some higher-end racks even have a special peg attachment for bands. If you are in freestanding jacks and have to use dumbbells, make sure you place a barrier like plates around them so they do not roll when you walk the weight out. The bench press may also need to be performed in a power rack with the bands set up as suggested for the squat, or you can loop the bands around very heavy dumbbells. Regardless of what setup you use, make sure the bands are set evenly. Bands need not be applied only to a barbell in a bottom-up fashion. They can also come from the top down. This method, if you use the bands in a reverse fashion, is actually known as the lightened method. Let's look at the squat. Attach the bands to the top of the squat rack instead of the bottom. The farther you squat down, the more the band helps you. So, as you are in the deepest, most difficult position, the band will help you the most. And as you squat the weight back to the starting position, the band will help you less and less. This is the same accommodating resistance concept, just in reverse order. The setup for chains is slightly different from that of bands. For the squat bench, to attach the chains to the bar, most lifters use a smaller chain. The smaller chain allows you to form a loop and fasten the loop with a carabiner. You will attach the larger chains to the loop. For the deadlift, if you do not have the AA weightlifting systems device, just drape the chain over the barbell sleeve. Here are some important points to remember about bands and chains. Bands cause an overspeed, more powerful, eccentric part of the movement than chains do. Chains feel much more like straight weight than bands do. It's easier to overtrain on bands than on chains. It's easier to overtrain with bands and chains than with traditional resistance. Avoid sets of more than 8 reps with bands. Unlike chains, bands allow nonlinear resistance. For example, they can be attached to a pec deck or diagonal leg press and still work like they do with a linear barbell movement. Neither bands nor chains should be used more than 3 weeks in a row because of potential overtraining. Stretch movements are movements that put a muscle at a position of maximal elongation. The idea is to activate the stretch reflex so you can recruit muscle fibers that may not have been directly hit with the compound movement. Stretch position movements are theorized to produce an incredibly favorable IGF-1 response, a very anabolic hormone. Although hyperplasia has not been proven 100% in humans, many believe that stretch movements would have the best chance of inducing. Examples include incline dumbbell curls, French press, dumbbell flies, stiff leg deadlifts. Peak contraction exercises are those that place tension on the muscle throughout the movement. A great example of this type of movement is a cable or accommodated resistance exercise in general. Basically, as leverage improves, resistance increases. So the muscles must contract maximally throughout the entire movement, not just in optimal leverage positions. Usually, when bodybuilders talk about feeling reps, squeezing reps, and shaping reps, they are referring to peak contraction style movements. The whole idea is to feel the muscle, not ballistically perform the movement. Examples: cable flies, triceps pushdowns, and cable concentration curls. Exercises that have classically fallen into either the stretch movement category or peak contraction category can suddenly fit into both of these categories with the addition of bands and chains. This makes the sum greater than the individual parts, producing a wonderful synergy, and you will have an advantage over your competitors. One example for an exercise that can fit into both the stretch movement category and the peak contraction category with the addition of a band is the dumbbell resisted band fly. To perform this exercise, you will put a resistance band around your back, holding it in your hands. You will also place a dumbbell in each hand, while the resistance band is still across your hand. You still receive the maximal stretch the solid, dead pig iron provides. But as you squeeze the dumbbells together, you now get a peak contraction-like effect. There are plenty of other movements in which bands and chains can be used, whether it is a band-resisted bar dip or drop set pull-ups performed with multiple chains. As you fail, pull off the chains and keep going. It might be chains on a barbell curl, bands on a leg press, or close grip bench press with chains. There are endless possibilities. Remember, to be the best, you will need to change with the times. And the new frontier of bands and chains is here. Use them for great results. To the uninitiated, it may look like bodybuilding focuses entirely on lifting weights. Although weightlifting will take a majority of a bodybuilder's time, some time should also be devoted to aerobic training. After all, many benefits that can be derived from aerobic exercise that extend beyond bodybuilding, such as a strengthened heart, decreased body fat, lowered blood pressure, and lowered cholesterol. However, not all effects of aerobic training are positive for the bodybuilder. Let's take a closer look at how aerobic exercise can both positively and negatively affect a bodybuilder's progress, and then discuss ways we can incorporate aerobic training into the program to attain maximal benefit while incurring no negative side effects. Studies have demonstrated that aerobics in excess can potentially lower testosterone levels. Low testosterone levels can sabotage a bodybuilder's potential gains. Besides decreased motivation and increased lethargy, hormones influence everything indirectly. With a less than adequate production of testosterone, your gains will be suboptimal. Using this information as a guide, if one had to choose between resistance training or aerobic exercise for improved health and body composition for a middle-aged client, resistance training reigns superior. There is no need to spend hours on the treadmill to get lean. Interval training a few times a week, coupled with 20 to 30 minutes of walking 2 to 3 times a week, will keep you healthy, happy, lean, and mean without reducing testosterone levels. Shoot for keeping your heart rate in the 55 to 70% range of your max heart rate. Here are some benefits of aerobic activity, such as moderate walking a few times a week. Increase general physical preparedness, GPP. Decrease delayed onset of muscle soreness, DOMS, thus enhancing recuperation. Increased heart health. Decrease stress. Help in maintaining healthy joints, muscles. Decreased body fat, increased energy levels. Science confirms that interval training is highly effective for fat loss. Compare the physiques of top-level sprinters with top-level distance runners, is a simplistic, logical response many give when asked why they feel interval training is superior. Remember, however, that the CNS is primarily affected by high-intensity work and takes at least 48 hours to recover. So interval training requires adequate recovery very similar to what intense resistance training requires. Here are some interval training examples. Incorporating barbell complexes is also a great strategy for burning body fat. Barbell complexes are performed as quickly as possible, moving exercise to exercise with no break. To construct a complex, you may do 5 to 8 squats, followed by 5 to 8 squats to presses, followed by 5 to 8 good mornings, followed by 5 to 8 power cleans, followed by 5 to 8 bent over rows, and finally finished off with 5 to 8 deadlifts. The beauty of barbell complexes is that they can be arranged somewhat specific to the muscle group being worked. If you train legs Monday and chest Tuesday, it would be counterproductive to do very intense intervals that emphasize legs and lower back, because doing so will not let the muscles recover. Strongman events can be great for conditioning fat loss as a finisher at the end of your workout, and can aid in the muscle building process too. Here are some strongman events that can be used as finishers in your training. Sled drags, front, back, lateral, farmer's walks, and tire flips. A recent study at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse demonstrated that intense kettlebell intervals burn calories at the same rate as a mile run at a 6-minute pace. That is 1,200 calories an hour. Clearly, fat loss is a byproduct of intense kettlebell training. 3 effective kettlebell exercises are clean and jerks, snatches, and swings. Here is a good circuit for conditioning and fat loss. Complete the circuit without a break. 10 kettlebell swings, 30 seconds of jumping rope, 5 clean and jerks each side, 30 seconds of jumping rope, 5 snatches each side. 30 seconds of jumping rope. Unlike other forms of interval training that are much more stressful on the CNS, jumping rope spares muscles and connective tissues stress for the athlete. Furthermore, jumping rope tones muscles throughout the entire body and develops lean muscles in all major muscle groups. Of course, jumping rope optimizes conditioning and maximizes athletic skills by combining agility, coordination, timing, and endurance. Most importantly for you, it can help burn body fat. Old-time bodybuilding champions did much less cardio than many do today. There is no reason to spend hours a day doing long, slow cardio like some bodybuilders do. The reason many of them are able to get away with performing so much aerobic training is because of drugs. These substances can literally change human physiology, both long and short term, and, as many have discovered, not for the better. Countless studies show endurance athletes have much lower testosterone levels than their anaerobic counterparts. So, if bodybuilding and packing on size and strength is your goal, endurance training should not be highest on your priority list. Generally speaking, fat loss comes from strength training and dieting. The role of joint flexibility in general fitness and athletics has received great attention for the last few decades. And in recent times, bodybuilding magazines have started publishing articles about stretching, warming up, and cooling down. Everyone needs a certain level of flexibility and mobility. When looking to elicit improvements to a client's flexibility and mobility, you must understand the anatomical and physiological basis of stretching. Muscle fibrils can change length because they consist of overlapping strands of protein polymers, called actin, the thin strands, and myosin, the thicker strands. During the stretch, the fibers elongate as each sarcomere extends to the point where no overlap between the thick and thin filaments exists. At this point, the remaining stress is taken up by the surrounding connective tissue. If the stretch tension continues to escalate beyond this point, however, microscopic tears develop both in the connective tissues and within the sarcomere itself. Such microtraumatic injuries eventually heal, but they can leave the muscle fiber less capable of contraction and extension. The neuromuscular system has built-in safeguards against severe muscular injury. These safeguards take the form of proprioceptors that can sense changes in muscle tension. The three main proprioceptors are the Golgi tendon organ, the muscle spindle, and the Pacinian corpuscle. When these changes are too sudden, too intense, or both, the proprioceptors act to inhibit the nervous impulse sent to the muscle. What are the implications for bodybuilders and others trying to improve joint mobility? Considering the anatomical safeguards, you can easily see that longer, frequent periods of stretching with less tension will produce greater results than short, intense bouts of stretching will, which tend to trigger the proprioceptors. Furthermore, the end position of stretches should be held at a point of mild discomfort, but no more. Otherwise, excessive microtrauma injuries to the sarcomere and connective tissue could occur. Specific joint range of motion, ROM, is measured with a goniometer, a specialized protractor with two arms that rotate about one another. The following are simple tests that can be performed to assess flexibility without the use of any special equipment. Sit and reach. The sit and reach test is used to assess trunk flexion, a function of hip and spine flexibility on the sagittal plane. Supine hamstring assessment. Hamstring length can also be assessed by having the subject lie on his or her back, with both legs together and extended. The subject lifts one leg, keeping it extended in the sagittal plane, until significant tension develops, or until the subject attempts to compensate by raising the other leg. If the raised leg can be brought to a vertical position prior to significant tension developing, hamstring flexibility is adequate. Trunk extension. For this test, the subject lies face down on the floor, in the start of a push-up position. The subject attempts to raise the trunk off the floor by extending the arms, while keeping the pelvis against the floor. Hip flexors. The subject rests on one knee and one foot, similarly to holding a football for the place kick. The front heel and rear knee should be approximately 12 to 18 inches apart. The subject pushes the rear hip down toward the floor. Viewed from the side, the subject should easily be able to align the pelvis between both knees, such that all three are in a straight line. Shoulder flexibility. The subject lies face up on a table, such that the lower legs hang off the end. Next, the subject raises both arms overhead, keeping the arms extended and hands close together. The subject should be capable of resting the entire arm against the table, without excessive arching of the back. Bilateral ROM deficits. Even more worrisome than a range of motion deficit is the discovery of a bilateral deficit, in which a joint on one side of the body has a significantly different ROM than the corresponding joint on the other side of the body has. Take the old-time bodybuilder who can fully extend one arm, but not the other. In this case, one side has full ROM, and the other side is lacking full ROM. So a bilateral deficit exists. As with all other biomotor abilities, the potential to increase joint flexibility to an extreme degree is to a certain extent genetically predetermined. Younger individuals are generally more flexible than older people are, and girls are usually more flexible than boys are. Bodybuilders lifting chronically with a partial range of motion will lose flexibility over time. Countless examples exist whereby inflexibility leads to injury. Most frequently, you will encounter problems caused by shortened hip flexors, overly tight hamstrings, and overly tight quadriceps. This is because long periods of sitting in which the hip flexors contract repeatedly over a reduced range of motion can shorten the psoas and iliacus muscles. Chronically shortened muscles can be the first step in a series of events leading to injury. Shortened hip flexors, for example, can lead to a reduction of the normal lordotic curve of the lumbar spine. This can impair the spine's load-bearing and shock absorption capacity. Specificity is obviously of profound importance if training is to be successful. As with all other biomotor abilities, joint flexibility can be enhanced only if the training methods are specific to the desired result. Flexibility is specific to three criteria. Joint specificity. A flexibility training program for the hips, for example, will not improve flexibility in any other joint. Speed specificity. For maximum effectiveness, stretching exercises must be very similar in form and speed to the skill you are trying to improve. Resistance training as a contributor to increased joint flexibility. Properly conceived resistance training programs can have a beneficial effect on flexibility levels. Individuals need enough flexibility for any situation they will normally encounter in day-to-day life, plus a little bit more. This little bit more is called the flexibility reserve. Conversely, if adequate flexibility is lacking, the difference between what you have and what you need is called your flexibility deficit. Of all the biomotor abilities, joint flexibility is perhaps the simplest to develop. The methods involved are well understood and do not require a great deal of time, effort, or specialized equipment. Here are some important factors when seeking to increase flexibility and mobility. The effect of body temperature on flexibility. Increased temperature helps facilitate increases in ROM, whereas decreased temperature tends to preserve increases in muscle length. Prior to the athletes performing stretching exercises, body temperature must be elevated through a warm-up. Tension magnitude during stretching. Stretch to the point of mild to moderate discomfort if the goal is to improve range of motion, but stop short of discomfort if the primary objective is to speed up the removal of waste products during or after a workout. Duration. Dynamic stretching involves several swings that last only a moment or so each. Static, active, and contract-relax methods involve longer periods lasting up to a minute or more. Stretching sessions rarely last more than 20 minutes, with each individual muscle normally taking 2 to 3 minutes at most. Breathing and relaxation. During the stretch, breathe normally and visualize the muscles, tendons, and ligaments lengthening during the stretch. Avoid breath holding, as it can increase blood pressure and general muscular tension. Stretching as a means of preventing delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. Although research does not confirm this, in the field, many swear by the notion that low to moderate intensity stretching exercises may be effective in reducing post-exercise muscle soreness, perhaps the best rationale for most people to stretch regularly. Now, let's take a look at the common methods of stretching. Static stretching. Static stretching is contraindicated prior to resistance training. Numerous studies have demonstrated that it can temporarily lower strength levels, power output, and speed. Two types of static stretching have been identified. In static active stretching, you assume the desired position, move slowly toward your extreme range of motion for the joint you are stretching, and upon reaching the desired level of tension, hold for 10 to 60 seconds. In static passive stretching, you have a partner move you toward your maximum range of motion, ROM, as you relax and submit to the stretch. Dynamic stretching, used primarily by athletes who need to increase range of motion for sport skills. Dynamic stretching involves swinging the arms and/or legs in a controlled manner. PNF method. Proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, PNF, is defined as a method of promoting or hastening the response of the neuromuscular mechanism through stimulation of the proprioceptors. To perform PNF stretching, the muscle group to be stretched is positioned so that the muscles are stretched and under tension. The individual then contracts the stretched muscle group for 5 to 6 seconds, while a partner or immovable object applies sufficient resistance to inhibit movement. The contracted muscle group is then relaxed, and a controlled stretch is applied for about 20 to 30 seconds. Contract Relax, CR method. Individuals in the fitness industry commonly refer to this method of stretching as PNF. However, we use the term contract relax to distinguish it from true PNF. The contract relax method is performed with a partner who carefully provides resistance for the muscle being stretched prior to actually stretching it. Contract antagonist relax, CA method. Very similar to the contract relax method, CA stretching facilitates an increase in muscle length through a maximum isometric contraction of the antagonist immediately prior to a static stretch of the agonist. Fascial stretching. Fascial stretching involves deep tissue manipulation and should only be performed by a competent physical therapist or certified rolfer. Remember, flexibility is not the name of the game in bodybuilding, but you will feel and perform better with adequate flexibility. To be the best, do not neglect any aspect of your training. Testing an athlete for performance progress is an extremely common practice in sports such as football, but it is not nearly as common in bodybuilding. Although big numbers do not offer a one-to-one correlation of how successful a bodybuilder will be, testing provides bodybuilders and trainers alike with valuable information on several levels. Testing an athlete for performance enhancement is a common practice in sports such as football. If you are a strength athlete, testing is your sport. Rather than simply going by feel, you can use testing, which will serve as a better indicator of where the athlete is in his or her physical progression. The benefits of testing include the following. Testing provides the athletes, skill coaches, and strength and conditioning specialists with an evaluation of a conditioning program's effectiveness. Testing provides the strength and conditioning coach with an evaluation of the athlete's compliance or adherence to the prescribed program. Testing provides the strength and conditioning coach with information on individual strengths and weaknesses. Testing is motivational. For safe and successful testing, a coach must first ask a number of questions. Will testing be conducted on individual athletes or several athletes? Who will supervise the test? How will the tests be conducted? How will the athletes prepare for the test? If several tests will be given, in what sequence will they occur? How will the data be recorded and analyzed? The strength and conditioning coach must make sure that the test is a suitable measure of what is intended to be measured. The coach must ensure that the test measures the specific type of strength or conditioning that it intends. A number of reasons might be causing you to find inconsistency in testing. They include: those who measured the performances did not take accurate measurements. The athlete being tested did not perform consistently. The instrument used during testing failed to produce an accurate measurement. Standard procedures were not followed. Several testers should be able to administer the same test on the same athlete and obtain similar results. To prevent injury, a number of precautionary measures that should be taken before, during, and after the test. Prepare your athletes for the test. Clear all unnecessary equipment and other objects from the testing area. Keep a watchful eye. Allow proper cool down for your athletes. Make sure your assistants, helpers are following proper testing and safety procedures. Use common sense. The 4 most common body composition measurement techniques available to fitness professionals are DEXA scan, hydrostatic weighing, bioelectrical impedance, and skin fold measurement. Although the DEXA scan and hydrostatic weighing are considered the most accurate, their greatest disadvantage is their inaccessibility to most fitness professionals, unless they are in a medical or university setting. Bioelectrical impedance's popularity has increased over the last few years because it is painless, quick, and easy to perform. However, the initial cost of the machine is high. The skin fold method of determining body fat is practical, affordable, and fairly easy to perform. Because skin fold measurements are the most practical strategy many fitness professionals employ to measure body composition in a gym setting, it is important to be aware of some related considerations. Take a minimum of 2 measurements at each site, taking them in rotational order, rather than taking consecutive readings at the same site. Your client's skin should be dry and free of oils and lotions. The more you practice, the better you will become at measuring skin folds accurately. For severely obese clients, greater than 45% body fat, you will not be able to measure skin fold accurately. Limit strength is how much force you can exert for an all-out effort. The easiest and most reliable method for determining limit strength is to perform 1 repetition for each exercise. Some may prefer to estimate their 1 rep max, 1 RM, by performing a multiple repetition test. But, of course, this is not as accurate as a real test because of individual differences. When you compare the results of one's limit strength with those of other people of similar age, body weight, and gender, you must remember that the fatter a person is, the lower his or her strength level will be. This is because that person's ratio of fat to muscle is poor. We have provided tables in the book to help you assess your client's limit strength levels. The 3 exercises that adequately test your limit strength are the squat, the deadlift, and the bench press. Collectively, these exercises are called powerlifting. To compare athletes of different weight divisions with each other, the Wilks formula is a simple equation based on each athlete's body weight and the total of the 3 lifts. As a bodybuilder, you always want to remember that you are judged based on the illusion your physique portrays to the judges. A bodybuilder with 17.5-inch arms may appear to have bigger arms than a bodybuilder with 19-inch arms will, if his biceps has a better shape when it hits a front dumbbell bicep pose. If this bodybuilder has smaller joints, he will appear to have bigger biceps. While this illusion of muscle hypertrophy is key to bodybuilding success, it is still important for the bodybuilding coach to take girth measurements to determine whether or not actual muscle hypertrophy is taking place as a result of the training program. When taking girth measurements, you must adhere to the following guidelines. Take measurements in a relaxed state. Do not leave tape loose. Measure both sides of the body. Write down measurements. Measure in the same spot every time. It is important to remember that bodybuilding is a subjective sport, but testing provides some objective answers. Therefore, it is vital that you conduct regular performance tests and body composition measurements with your athlete to ensure that optimal progress is being made. Periodization is a common buzzword in the world of strength and conditioning. It refers to how one's training is broken down into discrete time periods called macrocycles, mesocycles, and microcycles. In essence, systematically cycling training objectives, volume, and intensity toward one's goals. Ancient civilizations, such as the Chinese, Greeks, and Romans, understood the need for proper physical preparation for warfare. They realized that you simply could not hand a soldier a weapon and teach him how to fight. He needed to be in shape first. The ancient Greek Olympians spent the majority of a non-Olympic year in preparatory training. Nearly 100 years ago, Russian text advocated dividing training into general, preparatory, and specific training stages. The following is not an exhaustive list of all types of periodization, but an overview of the more popular types. Linear periodization starts a training cycle with lower intensity and higher volume, and progressively, over a training cycle, is increased. In general, linear periodization divides training into 3 phases. 1. Hypertrophy. 2. Strength. And 3. Power. In that order. Reverse linear periodization. Linear periodization in reverse order. The cycle starts with high intensity and low volume, and progresses to higher volume with lower intensity. Undulating periodization. This is a nonlinear model of periodization in which training variables are frequently adjusted daily or weekly. This model concurrently trains hypertrophy, strength, and endurance. Session A might train power. Session B might train hypertrophy, and Session C might train strength. Flexible nonlinear periodization allows for training based on the athlete's readiness. When an athlete feels good, he or she goes for it, and when an athlete does not feel ready, he or she backs off. Block periodization could just as easily be called focused training. This is when special emphasis of one kind of training is focused on a specific quality in a mesocycle, or block. Highly concentrated training is purposefully directed on minimal qualities. If you are 4 weeks out from a bodybuilding competition, you will train differently than if the competition is 4 months away. Periodization is important for athletes to peak at the right time, make necessary gains in strength, and display their best performances in competition. It also keeps the training program from becoming boring and helps athletes avoid injuries and overtraining. When you design a program, you must keep the following programming laws in mind. 1. The law of individual differences. Not everyone can train in the same manner. Even individual athletes over time change with training. 2. The law of overcompensation and overload. Simply, training must progressively increase in intensity over time. 3. The SAID principle and specificity principle. The body will adapt in a highly specific manner to the stress it receives. Simply put, you must train how you compete. 4. General adaptation syndrome, GAS, and law of use-disuse. Periods of low intensity must follow periods of high intensity. The fitness fatigue model does not replace the general adaptation syndrome model. It simply expands on it. This simply means that if stress is great, fitness, performance decreases for a time, and then supercompensates to its original state and then beyond. Fitness and fatigue dictate training and its adaptations. An example of fatigue is the delayed onset of muscle soreness, DOMS. Bigger, stronger muscles that result after you have recovered are an example of fitness. Every stressor in life, even the ones outside of training, cause fatigue. Assuming you have been adequately stressed and recovered, greater fitness will result. The general adaptation syndrome model considers only total training volume, whereas the fitness fatigue model takes into account volume, along with intensity and magnitude of the training stimuli. Bench pressing 300 pounds for 3 sets of 8 reps will result in a more hypertrophic response. 300 pounds for 8 sets of 3 reps will result in more neural adaptations. And bench pressing 80 pounds for 3 sets of 30 reps will result in more flushing or active recovery. All 3 scenarios are 7,200 pounds of total volume, yet modulate different training adaptations. If athletes are overtrained, they have not recovered sufficiently. This could just as easily be called chronic under-recovery. If athletes train hard all the time too often, they will overtrain. Periodizing their training, mixing periods of higher and low intensity, not only every week but also long-term, will result in being able to train harder and more often without overtraining. Although recovery modalities can be helpful, the best way to prevent overtraining is through periodization. This cannot be overemphasized. Many factors are involved in creating a periodized program. Some things to consider are: 1. Younger athletes will recover more quickly than will older athletes. 2. Younger athletes are also usually less experienced than older athletes are. 3. Each athlete will change in experience level and recovery ability during his or her training. 4. Athletes using illegal drugs recover faster than clean athletes do. Now, let's look at the terminology used to describe the various phases of a periodized training cycle. A macro cycle can be thought of as an entire training period. Though it is generally thought of as a year, this is not always the case. A mesocycle is a periodic breakdown in a macrocycle. Although the overall focus in a mesocycle is changed, it should be noted that mesocycles blend together. An example of mesocycle would be a 6 to 8 week period prior to a strongman contest. A microcycle is described as one cycle in intensity. Recall that periods of high intensity must be followed by periods of low intensity before another period of high intensity can occur. For certain muscles, this could take as little as 5 days and as much as 3 weeks. Thus, although a microcycle is often thought of as 1 week, this is not always true. Using the same reps, sets, frequency, training loads, and methods of training time after time will not help you become stronger or more muscular. Your muscles simply adapt so that you are no longer overloading them. The following list outlines ways to increase intensity so that a training plateau does not occur. Increase training poundages. Increase total volume. Use bodybuilding methods. Drop sets, rest pause, negatives, cheating, etc. Increase sets. Increase reps. Decrease rest periods. Increase mechanical advantage, decreasing leverage. Add bands and chains. Now, let's discuss how to sequence your exercises within a training session. Because speed, explosive movements, and agility require much of the body's resources, they hold precedence in order of training. Because bigger muscles require more energy and effort than smaller muscles do, they should be worked first. A practical example would be doing a squat before a leg curl. As far as flexibility training is concerned, it is important to remember that it should never be undertaken unless the body is fully warmed up. Not only is training limited to weight training, but also it is important that medical, nutritional, and supplemental technologies be applied to the athlete. General guidelines for proper order of exercises, drills, and flexibility training. Psychological training, visualization, warm-up, dynamic flexibility training, explosive training, if applicable, compound movements, isolation movements, flexibility training, cool-down, application of appropriate therapy. A bodybuilder's training program can be broken down into 3 phases: the foundational training phase, the bulking phase, and the cutting phase. The primary purpose of foundational training is to strengthen your weaknesses, recover from any injuries, and develop a foundation of strength in all muscles, tendons, ligaments, and health and fitness. This typically involves training for limit strength, but it can also comprise the most non-specific components of fitness involved in your sport. The importance of developing limit strength during the foundational training period cannot be overemphasized for you, the bodybuilder. The higher your 1 repetition max on squat, the more weight you can do for a set of 10 on squats. This ultimately leads to greater muscle hypertrophy. After building your base during the foundational training phase, the next, more specific phase would be a hypertrophy-specific phase. In the bodybuilding world, this is commonly referred to as the bulking phase. The goal of the bulking phase is simple: to increase muscle mass. The bulking phase is also when the bodybuilder takes time to bring up his or her lagging body parts. If during your last competition, the judges thought your arms were too big compared to your shoulders, then during the bulking phase, you could target those delts to increase their size. So, you laid your foundation, you added some serious muscle mass. But what is next? The next step is getting ready for the stage. The competition prep, or cutting phase, is when you really get to see the fruits of your labor. Here are some parameters for you to follow in the weight room during your cut. Increase the frequency of training to 5 to 7 days per week. Perform cardio training 2 to 3 days per week. Utilize superset, trisets, and giant sets. Increase the intensity of training by incorporating strategies such as shorter rest periods, drop sets, and tempo sets. Keep rest periods between exercises as short as possible. If you find yourself lacking energy due to being in a calorie deficit, try breaking up your training sessions into 2 workouts, one in the morning and one in the evening. Remember, optimizing recovery, maximizing gains, and peaking at the right time come down to one thing: periodization. The smart bodybuilder will use exercises, methods, and routines that have been both empirically tested and proven to provide excellent results and a superior physique. Bodybuilding is not merely about getting huge muscles. To win competitions, you must also be symmetrical. In this lecture, we will explore the idea of symmetry and of how to improve lagging body parts to create a well-proportioned physique. Massive, lean, and symmetrical muscle is all you want. For most bodybuilders, especially the novice, this can be accomplished simply by eating a clean diet and training heavy core lifts. However, as you evolve more and more, you're going to find that advanced techniques will be needed to keep the gains coming. Training with maximal intensity and low repetitions in the 1 to 5 rep range with greater than 85% of a 1 repetition max causes myofibrillar hypertrophy. However, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is an increase in the volume of the non-contractile muscle cell fluid, sarcoplasm. This fluid accounts for 25 to 30% of the muscle size. Even though the muscle increased in size, the density of muscle fibers per unit decreased, resulting in no increase in muscular strength. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is induced through higher repetition ranges and a greater amount of volume. Powerlifters with minimal body fat have a much different look and appear to have a different shape than do bodybuilders with a similar percentage of body fat, although the 2 types weigh the same. For decades, science has known that certain heads of muscles function differently from one another, examples being the pectoralis major and the deltoids. Implementing various exercises that attack the muscles at various angles, different cadences, rep ranges, and volume prescriptions is the only way to maximally develop a muscle. Even exercise technique plays a role in the development of muscle. For example, performing dips with a forward lean and elbows out will place more stress on the pecs than will a more upright posture. Although compound movements should compose the foundation of a bodybuilder's training program, it is important to keep in mind that isolation exercises also have their place in a bodybuilder's training program. Muscles do not work in isolation. By forcing them to do so via single joint movements, overload takes place, Overload is what we seek in training. The average person on the street can produce a respectable, imposing physique using primarily core lifts only. The bodybuilder is in a different situation. Check your ego at the door when performing isolation exercises. Complete isolation is impossible, but do your best. Synergist and stabilizer muscles may be somewhat involved, but make an effort to place the load on the appropriate muscles. This is done with muscle intention, which means purposeful contraction of the muscles being worked. Unilateral exercise research has conclusively shown that unilateral resistance training, one limb at a time, forces your body to recruit more muscle fibers than bilateral resistance training does. Performing an exercise unilaterally many times is a great way not only to identify a specific weakness or imbalance, but also to stop it dead in its tracks. The Dark Ages are over, although many still prescribe to the notion that a muscle group can only be worked 1 day a week, and there is no other way. Comparison of 1 day and 3 days per week of equal volume resistance training in experienced subjects was a landmark study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research in 2000. The study compared 1 day versus 3 days of weight training weekly, with the training volume the same. There were 2 control groups. Group 1 lifted 1 day per week for 3 sets to failure, 1 day. And Group 2 lifted 3 days per week of 1 set to failure, 3 day. The 1 day group achieved only 62% of the 1 rep max increases of the 3 day group in both upper body and lower body lifts. Muscle mass increases were greater in the 3 day group. This study showed that a higher frequency of resistance training increased better strength and mass gains. A muscle has an origin and insertion. The origin is the part that does not move, whereas the insertion is the part that does move. To fully develop a muscle, you need to attack both muscle functions. One way is to select exercises that do both. Charles Poliquin proposed origin-insertion supersets. For the biceps, the example Poliquin cited was close-grip chin-ups supersetted with inclined dumbbell bicep curls. When you do a chin-up, the elbows remain in a fixed position while the shoulders literally move through air. On an inclined dumbbell bicep curl, the opposite takes place. The shoulders are stationary and movement occurs at the elbow. The concept of origin insertion supersets is that a variety of exercises are needed to hit the muscle at a variety of angles in order to optimally develop the muscle. It is important to prioritize lagging body parts in your training schedule to ensure that optimal body development occurs. Setting priorities does not only mean working what is most important at the beginning of the week. It takes a bit of creativity and planning. For example, on Wednesday you work 4 hours, but every other day you typically work 12 hours. Chest is your best body part, and legs are your weakest. What then is the solution? Surely by now you have figured out you won't be hitting chest on Wednesday. You will be freshest on Wednesday, so train legs then. Doing so will allow you to put maximal effort into your leg day. To get optimal results, you and your clients must break out of your comfort zones. For instance, even though you may love to train hard and heavy, you may have always had an embarrassing weakness doing chin-ups. This does not mean that you should do endless sets of lat pull-downs with cheating force to oblige your ego. Go hit the chin-up bar. Though it may take time to perfect this movement, once you have done so, you will reap both physiological and psychological rewards to help you in your next competition. Some high-profile celebrity trainers and misguided strength coaches alike have perpetuated the belief that the best way to recruit the muscles that stabilize the core is to perform traditional strength training exercises on unstable surfaces. Recently, James Kohler of California State University Northridge led a study showing that training on stable surfaces overloaded and best recruited core muscles. Scientific studies confirm that training on a stable surface is the most efficient way to load core muscles. Other studies echo this finding. Athletes who are required to compete on unstable surfaces can look at occasionally training on them. However, athletes are misinformed if they believe they are overloading their core. Because the goal is size and strength, there is no reason to train on an unstable surface. A number of strategies have been outlined for you to maximize the development of uncooperative parts. Practice these. They can be used in conjunction with the bodybuilding methods outlined in the next lecture. If heavy bench presses aren't maximizing chest development, try the strategies that will be covered later in the course, such as a pre-exhaustion technique, rest pauses, drop sets, or a reverse pyramid. When traditional approaches are not providing the results you want, be willing to break out of your comfort zone and to incorporate new strategies. In this lecture, we will cover a number of methods that successful bodybuilders and trainers have used to build award-winning physiques. Pay close attention and remember that a successful program will contain bits and pieces of a few or all of them. Bro science is an anecdotal creed emanating from bodybuilding circles. It has driven training methodologies for generations of iron disciples. Some of these methods are validated by scientific studies, whereas others need to be eliminated from the bodybuilder's regimen. Let's take a look at a number of popular methodologies bodybuilders commonly use. To allow for maximal muscle stimulation, many bodybuilders will adopt a split training system. Very simply, a split training system is when the athlete works different body parts on different training days. This type of training allows the bodybuilder to train with more intensity throughout the week when compared with a lifter who does total body workouts every training day. A superset is when 2 exercises are performed consecutively without a break. Originally, supersets were defined as combining 2 exercises of antagonist, opposing muscle groups. An example would be biceps curls, followed immediately by triceps extensions. In today's world of bodybuilding, the term superset is sometimes used differently from its original intent. Frequently, it is used to describe a single joint, isolation movement, paired with a multi-joint, compound movement for the same muscle group. A popular chest superset would be pec deck and bench press. A giant set consists of combining 3 exercises, and sometimes even more without resting between exercises. A giant tri-set, in its original intention, would be used to develop individual muscles within groups consisting of 3 or more muscles. An example would be lateral raises, inverted flies, and front raises. These 3 exercises would work the 3 heads of the deltoids: lateral side, posterior, rear, and anterior, front, as independently as possible. Rest pause training breaks down one set into several mini-sets with a brief rest between each. With slight tweaks, the rest pause method can be used to reach both strength and hypertrophy goals. Traditionally, drop sets have been used as a way to continue exercise with a lower intensity once muscular failure has been achieved at a higher intensity. Examples of drop set training would be the dumbbell run the rack method or a barbell strip set. Many bodybuilders opt to perform their drop sets on plate-loaded or selectorized machines, as this is relatively safer, and because it allows bodybuilder or workout partners to quickly reduce the load, either by shedding plates or by adjusting the pin along the weight stack. Some ambitious bodybuilders use drop sets with barbell and even dumbbell exercises. The Euroblast focuses on the pump, pumping the muscles in different ways and suffusing the body part you're working with massive quantities of blood and nutrients that muscles need. Here are a few ways you can use the Euroblast method. Pick one exercise and do only one set, and don't count reps. Simply keep the weight moving up and down until that body part reaches peak pump. When using it on the last exercise in a series of multiple sets and exercises for a body part, do short-range reps, moving the weight only 3 to 6 inches up and down, and keep doing those short-range reps until the muscle is no longer able to move the weight. Use forced reps with a partner, whereby the partner helps you. After you've reached muscular failure, do 5 to 7 more reps. Then you rack the weight and your partner strips off at least 40 to 60% of the weight, and you do another 5 to 7 reps with your partner's help. Staggered sets is a type of training in which you stagger your smaller and more slowly developing body parts between sets for larger muscle groups, such as doing a set of wrist curls or concentration curls between sets of leg presses or squats. This will allow you to train the bigger muscle group, legs in this example, with plenty of energy and power, while also working the smaller muscle, either forearms or biceps in this example. Traditional pyramiding involves performing sets consisting of high reps at the beginning of the workout, base of pyramid, working toward the top of the pyramid by decreasing reps and increasing weight. Starting with lighter weights gives your muscles and connective tissues a chance to warm up for the heavier weight later in the workout. As you increase weight, you overload your muscle fibers, and that induces muscle hypertrophy. Reverse pyramiding is the opposite of traditional pyramiding. The base is the heavy weight, and you increase reps and decrease weight as you work your way up the pyramid. Pre-exhaustion training involves using a single joint isolation movement to failure before performing a heavier multi-joint compound movement. A practical example would be leg extensions before front squats for the quadriceps, or cable flies before the bench press for the chest. It is important to remember that research has indicated that pre-exhaustion training will not lead to greater muscle fiber recruitment, or even to greater joint safety for that matter. Thus, it should be used sparingly, if at all, in a training program. Post-exhaustion training is a strategy in which instead of pre-fatiguing the muscle with an isolation exercise prior to performing a heavy compound movement, the heavy compound movement is performed first in the workout, and the isolation movements are performed later in the workout. The advantage to this type of training is that you will be freshest for the compound movement. After all, compound movement should serve as the base of your training, as they provide the most stimulation for muscle growth and evoke a significant hormonal response to training. German volume training. This method should probably be called the 10 sets method, but legendary strength coach Charles Poliquin has made it better known as German volume training. It is believed to be originated out of German weightlifting circles by coach Rolf Fesser as a program to add muscle in the off-season. Bill Kazmaier used this method in the bench press in the off-season, as did I, Josh Bryant, the youngest person ever to bench press 600 pounds raw. Originally, German volume training, the 10 sets method, was a protocol of 10 sets of 10 repetitions of a compound movement, using a 20 repetition max, or approximately 60% of the athlete's 1 rep max. Rest periods of 1 to 3 minutes have been advocated. However, rest depends on the movement being performed, the load used, and the athlete's anaerobic capacity. In the event of not being able to complete all of the repetitions, reduce the load by 2.5 to 5%. So, if you were using 200 pounds and did not complete the final rep on the 7th set, use 190 to 195 pounds on the following set. 20-rep breathing squats. In this style of training, breathing squats are done for 20 repetitions with a weight you would typically do for 10 repetitions. It is one all-out set. Each time you think you will fail, take 3 to 4 deep breaths and continue until you reach 20 reps. These sets should be a very painful and unpleasant experience. If you find they are not, add some weight to the bar. The forced repetition strategy is preferred by many bodybuilders and offers a huge benefit when properly implemented. When you can no longer complete a rep by yourself, you have reached the point of failure. Going beyond this point with assistance for additional reps, generally 1 to 4, is forced reps. Forced reps propel you past your pain threshold. Some believe this lowers the excitation threshold of hard-to-stimulate motor units in ways that would never be possible otherwise. Most lifts are composed of both an eccentric and concentric portion. The body can handle more weight during the eccentric portion, so some bodybuilders have taken to doing sets of only eccentric contractions in an effort to increase intensity. If your bench press max is 250 pounds and you put 275 pounds on the bar and slowly lower the weight, you have performed a negative in the traditional sense. After the weight is lowered, your partner will assist you by helping you lift the weight back to arms extension, or the starting point. The weight is lowered once again, and the muscles are engaged in an all-out fight against almighty gravity. Some athletes can handle an excess of 160% of their one repetition max on negatives. Partial reps are a movement performed in a specific range of motion. For the bench press, an example would be a board press. For the deadlift, a rack pull. And for a military press seated, a military press to the top of the head, or presses from pins in a power rack. Partial reps allow for an overload. In other words, you can use more weight in a partial range of motion than in a full range of motion, which will help your central nervous system adapt to heavier weights and provide a huge psychological boost as you climb the intensity ladder of heavy weights. Dog crap training, DC training, is the training philosophy of Southern California bodybuilder Dante Trudel. Trudel developed this training philosophy as an alternative to more traditional high-volume approaches. The idea behind DC training is to train heavy. Your limit strength is your base. Stronger muscles generally equal bigger muscles. Although the correlation is not always that direct, getting stronger is a surefire way to increase neuromuscular efficiency and set the stage to increase muscle mass. Peak contraction training is simply the isolation of muscles through movements that remove the synergist muscles. For example, peak contraction training would call for a cable fly over a dumbbell fly because of the continuous tension offered. This would be done at a slow speed, purposefully feeling out the tension placed on the pectorals and holding the cables together at the top, or peak of the movement, where tension is greatest, for 1 to 2 seconds, maximally contracting the chest. The 1978 Mr. Universe, the late Mike Mentzer, had some radical ideas when it came to building the body. Mentzer's training system was a form of high-intensity training he named heavy-duty training. In a nutshell, Mentzer's system was based on believing virtually every bodybuilder was severely overtrained. Mentzer called for infrequent, brief, and very intense workouts. Every set was taken to absolute failure, and the goal was to always use more weight than was used in the previous workout. Many times, just one set per body part was taken to total failure. Heavy-duty routines are generally performed for the whole body 2 to 3 times a week, and some go as infrequently as a single session every 9 to 10 days. The peripheral heat action training idea is to keep circulating blood through the body throughout the entire workout, done by attacking the smaller muscles around the heart first, and then moving outward. This system is vigorous and requires continued intense exercise for a prolonged period with no rest. For these reasons, the poorly conditioned bodybuilder and the faint of heart will not do well with this training system. The idea with peripheral heart action training is to use primarily compound movements for efficiency. The system is composed of 4 distinct sequences of exercises, and each sequence is designed to encompass every major body segment. The goal is to shunt blood up and down the body. This is extremely taxing on the cardiovascular system, for which the obvious benefits are a reduction in body fat and, of course, improved metabolic rate. Circuit training is similar to peripheral heart action training, but it's a strategy more suitable for the beginner-level trainee. The objective in peripheral heart action training is to keep the heart rate at 80% of your maximum. With circuit training, your goal is to complete the prescribed exercises within a time limit. Circuit training is supposed to increase your metabolic rate and raise your heart rate, so the emphasis should be on larger muscle groups. You do not want to give up the strength aspect, so it is recommended to perform circuits with an emphasis on opposing muscle groups, preferably with emphasis on compound movements. In layman's terms, time under tension means the length of time it takes to complete a set. The idea behind time under tension training is that the longer a muscle is under tension, the more muscle breakdown there is, and this extra muscle breakdown leads to greater muscle growth. Studies generally demonstrate that the most effective time under tension for maximal hypertrophy is 30 to 50 seconds per set. The total length of time is important. However, avoid spending maximal time in the portion of the lift that is the easiest. The legendary Charles Poliquin popularized tempo training. In essence, your goal is not only to perform a specific set in a predetermined amount, but also to perform the reps at a prescribed cadence. Different speeds of contraction cause different adaptations to resistance training. A shot putter needs to train fast contractions. You, the bodybuilder, need to train a wide array of speeds. 4 numbers make a tempo. Let's look at a 4-1-2-1 tempo, a common prescription for hypertrophy. The first number 4 is the negative, eccentric phase. Let's say you are bench pressing. This means take 4 seconds to lower the weight to your chest. The second number is a 1, meaning a 1-second pause at the bottom of the lift between the negative and positive portion. The third number is the amount of time it will take you to perform the positive, or concentric portion of the lift. In this case, 2 seconds. The last number, 1, is the isometric hold of 1 second at the top of the movement before beginning the negative portion of the lift. Power building is a hybrid of powerlifting and bodybuilding. Successful powerlifters are part bodybuilder, and successful bodybuilders build their base with powerlifting. Essentially, the workout starts with a heavy core lift and the assistance work, and more traditional bodybuilding techniques follow suit. As such, a back day begins with the deadlift, a chest day with the bench press, and a leg day with the king, squats. Power building is traditionally much higher volume than many powerlifters use in preparation for meets. Many use this form of training in the off-season, and some even do it leading up to a powerlifting contest. Compensatory acceleration training, popularized by Dr. Fred Hatfield, simply means lifting submaximal weights with maximal force. CAT training provides the bodybuilder with great neural adaptations, a true mind-muscle connection. Because CAT training is performed in basic core lifts, the learning curve is virtually non-existent, especially compared with Olympic lifts designed to improve speed strength. Muscle priority training is an extremely basic idea. Train whatever is most important in your workout first. Generally, in this context, it is working your weakness first. After all, once your weakness is eliminated, you will proudly sport an armor-clad, prize-winning physique. Know your priorities, then organize your training around them and based on what you hope to accomplish. Generally, cheating on an exercise means swinging a weight past a sticking point on a front raise. It might be a slight hip bump out on the bottom. On a bent-over row, it might be a slight vertical pull on the way up, and it may be a kip to finish off your last rep on pull-up. The philosophy of cheating exercises is similar to that of a drop set. On a drop set, you reduce resistance to continue the set. On a cheating movement, you get outside swing help to complete the movement. Cheating does not require the assistance of a partner. Periodization refers to how one's training is broken down into discrete time periods called macrocycles, mesocycles, and microcycles. Essentially, we look at long-term as well as short-term planning by systematically cycling methodology, volume, and intensity toward one's goals. To maximize muscular development, you must have knowledge of various bodybuilding methods. If you decide to use a new method, you need to know why. If you avoid a certain method, you should have a reason for doing so. Take this knowledge and build with it. Hard-training, high-performance athletes require high-performance fuel. Bodybuilders train as hard as any athlete does, but there's a difference. Not only do bodybuilders have to perform in the gym, but also they have to look great outside of the gym. If you eat poorly, it will be impossible to eat your best. The old saying, "You are what you eat," is true. Essential nutrients are those nutrients that the body does not produce at all or makes in insufficient quantities. Because of this, we must obtain these nutrients through our diet. The 6 types of essential nutrients needed in the daily diet include fats, carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. There are 3 macronutrients. As you can probably deduce from the name, macronutrients are those nutrients that the body needs in large amounts. These 3 macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Carbohydrates are not just the body's preferred source of energy, but also are the most easily digestible macronutrient. A carbohydrate is composed of hydrogen and oxygen. There are 2 kinds of carbohydrates: the simple ones, sugars, and the complex ones, which include starches and fibers. Fiber is found in various plants, fruits, leaves, grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Fruits and vegetables are your best choices for sources of fiber. Many functional benefits arise from eating a high-fiber diet, and numerous studies confirm that high-fiber diets reduce the rate of cardiovascular disease, colon cancer, and diabetes. Proteins are the body's most important structural material, composing much of muscle, bone, enzymes, some hormones, and cell membranes. Proteins are constructed of amino acids. 9 of the 20 amino acids found in food are considered essential in the diet because the body cannot produce them. Some principal points to remember about protein include the following. Protein is essential for growth and recovery. Branch-chained amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, are required to keep muscle breakdown to a minimum. 1 to 2 servings of protein should be consumed with every meal. High-quality protein supplements can be used, but remember, the real thing is always better than a synthetic product. Not all protein is created equal. Protein in whole dairy products and fatty meats is extremely difficult to digest, if your body even digests it at all. The final macronutrient is fat. You must have fat in your diet. Your body uses fatty acids to carry out things such as building cell membranes and performing crucial functions in the brain, eyes, and lungs. Some other functions of fats include acting as a fuel source during exercise, providing insulation, aiding in absorbing fat-soluble vitamins, supplying essential fatty acids, providing protective padding for body structures, and protecting your nerves. Remember, not all fats are created equal. For the most part, your fat consumption should be from unsaturated sources such as olive oil, flax oil, salmon, and grass-fed organic meats. Avoid fried foods, fast food, processed lunch meats, extremely fatty meats, poultry, margarine, shortening, and many salad dressings. Vitamins are any of various relatively complex organic substances found in plant and animal tissue and required in small quantities for controlling metabolic processes. Everyone needs vitamins, and active people need more vitamins than sedentary people do. Minerals are found in plants and animal foods and in drinking water. Many times, the quantities of minerals found in these sources are too small. Because the stresses associated with sports activities promote the loss of various minerals, it is important to increase your mineral intake. You will never perform your best unless you are properly hydrated. It is nearly impossible to set an exact general fluid requirement, however. The rate of water loss is affected by weather, diet, exercise, obesity, drugs, and a host of other factors. Dehydration will drastically affect mental and physical function and performance. In some cases, when water loss is as little as 1%, physical performance can be significantly compromised. For bodybuilding, the classical recommendations are a diet composed of 50 to 60% carbohydrates, 25 to 30% protein, and 15 to 30% fat. Following a traditional approach, if you needed 3,000 calories to continue slow muscle growth during the off-season, for example, you would be getting 450 calories from fat, 15% of your daily calories, 750 calories from protein, 25%, and the remaining 1,800 calories from carbohydrates, 60%. Of course, these calories are divided by the number of times you eat each day, 5 to 6 times. The following are general guidelines that are important to consider when planning a diet. Eat high-quality complex carbohydrates several times throughout the day. Consume high-quality protein every 2 to 3 hours. Consume fats. Fats are an essential part of your diet. Eat 5 to 6 meals a day. Eat 1 to 2 servings of vegetables at every meal. Basal energy expenditure, BEE, or basal metabolic rate, BMR, as it is sometimes called, is the energy requirement to maintain life. It is measured at rest, but not asleep, in a thermoneutral environment in the post-absorptive state. Calories must be ingested according to your upcoming activity level. If you plan to sit at a desk at work, eat less. However, if you plan to train, eat more. The following are general guidelines that are important for you to consider when trying to add mass. Add 2 calories per pound of body weight to your daily caloric intake. The added calories should be from all macronutrients. Spread these added calories equally among 5 meals per day. Reduce your caloric intake 2 days per week by 2 calories per pound of body weight. Right after a show or after a long diet is the best time to bulk because your body will act like a sponge, absorbing nutrients with maximum efficiency. The following are general guidelines that are important for you to consider when trying to lose fat. Subtract 2 calories per pound of body weight from your daily caloric intake 5 days per week. The reduced calories should come mostly from carbohydrate and fat calories, and not protein. Eat minimally 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Do not reduce the frequency of meals. Increase your caloric intake 2 days per week by 2 calories per pound of body weight to ensure that you're getting enough calories to put on lean muscle, and that upward BMR adjustments are being made. Trying to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time is difficult. The zigzag diet was designed for this purpose. This strategy is designed to yield results over time. Here's how it works. Let's say you presently weigh 240 pounds. Your body fat is 20%, and your goal is to weigh 240 pounds with 10% body fat. Very simply, you up your caloric intake for 4 to 5 days and then cut back for a day or two. In this way, you gain approximately a pound of muscle and a pound of fat, and then lose the fat while retaining the muscle. During exercise, the following acute catabolic effects take place: increased cortisol levels, decreased net protein balance, depleted glycogen, depleted insulin, and increased metabolic rate. The idea of intra-workout is to not only counteract these effects, but maximize the anabolic ones. This can be aided by consuming a sports drink that contains branched-chain amino acids, BCAAs. The anabolic phase lasts up to 90 minutes post-workout. This is when your muscle cells are ready to grow. If your muscles are fed with the right nutrients post-workout, abundant muscle growth will take place. If they are not, catabolism will be magnified and prolonged. And that's not a good thing, as muscle will continue to be broken down instead of repaired. Insulin sensitivity and glucose tolerance peak post-workout. So up to 2 grams of carbohydrate per kilo of body weight and 0.5 grams of protein per kilo of body weight can be consumed during this time. In today's world, it is simply impossible for athletes to eat properly all the time, even under the best of circumstances. That's why many athletes supplement their food intake. Thousands upon thousands of different supplements claim to do everything from increasing the size of your muscles to curing cancer. That is the nature of the supplement industry, to make bigger claims than the company before it did to gain a share of the marketplace. Sadly, the supplement companies are now, in essence, marketing machines, rather than science-based companies seeking to develop a new and effective product. More money is spent on advertising to the target audience than on actual research and development. The information is provided not to demonize the supplement manufacturers, but to raise your awareness, and we hope to save you time and money. Like in all things, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If you are getting your nutrition from real food, which you should be, then the list of supplements you should be taking is pretty short. Some supplements that may be a helpful adjunct to a bodybuilder's training program include multivitamins, multi-blend protein powders, antioxidants, branched-chain amino acids, coenzyme Q10, creatine monohydrate, glucose polymers, inosine, L-glutamine, octacosanol, and caffeine. Home run records being broken, mysterious jumps in performance marks of Olympic sports by 10 to 15% from the 1950s to 1960s, professional bodybuilders weighing close to 300 pounds shredded, female bodybuilders with muscle size, density, and cuts that would literally wipe the stage clean of a 1980-era Frank Zane, raw strength records being broken with stunning regularity. Besides advancements in training methods, scientific advancements in nutritional strategies and recovery modalities, a desire to be the best, and athletes working harder and harder in their sports becoming their careers. What do all of these have in common? The answer is drugs. Since the 1950s, steroids have gained in popularity. They were not banned until the 1976 Olympics. And even with the ban, many athletes have easily circumvented testing protocols. Today, most major sports test for steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs. However, in bodybuilding and powerlifting, some contests test for anabolic steroids and others do not. To find a list of drug-free bodybuilding events, visit naturalbodybuildingevents.com. For the general public, anabolic and androgenic steroids, AAS, are simply referred to as steroids. Common slang names for steroids in gyms include juice, sauce, and gear. AAS are synthetic derivatives of the hormone testosterone. Some are taken orally, whereas others are injectable. Injectables can be water or oil-based. Oil-based steroids generally have much longer half-lives, and therefore call for less frequent injections. AAS essentially act as the male sex hormones of testosterone and dihydrotestosterone. Steroids have been shown to increase protein synthesis in cells. In turn, a buildup of cellular tissue in the muscle occurs. In other words, steroids are anabolic, hence the name anabolic steroids. Athletes ingest AAS either orally or via injectables. Oral ingestion might come in a pill, capsule, or even in liquid form. Although athletes use many types of oral steroids, the two most common ones to add muscle and strength are Dynabol and Anadrol 50. Both of these oral compounds are extremely toxic, although in some people they may work well for gaining strength and muscle size. The most popular injectable steroid for increasing strength body weight ratio for powerlifters is trenbolone, also referred to as Finaplex. For bodybuilders, trenbolone gives the user a very hard and ripped appearance, and it greatly increases aggression. Many users have trouble breathing while using this highly toxic compound. Many believe that testosterone is not toxic. However, though testosterone may not be directly toxic, you are still injecting your body with a synthetic hormone that effectively shuts down your own natural production of testosterone. Are steroids safe in moderation for non-medical use? It is tough to say with 100% confidence at this point. Not enough long-term research has been conducted, and most of our evidence is anecdotal from former users. Although former users are not dropping dead at an alarming rate, that does not mean steroids are safe. Anecdotally, I have observed former steroid abusers do not seem to live as long as non-steroid using counterparts do, and abusers seem to have more health issues that doctors cannot conclusively link to steroid use. When it comes to the safety of steroids, many experts believe the health risks are influenced by the type, the dose, the duration of use, and whether the user has pre-existing conditions. AAS is effective because it stimulates androgenic receptor sites, and this in turn opens the gateway to the anabolic process. The issue is the unwanted side effects that can potentially accompany AAS abuse. Such things as hair loss are on the lighter end of the spectrum. On the other end are such items as enlargement of the heart, not to mention a potentially catastrophic disruption of hormonal homeostasis. Testosterone is the holy grail of anabolic steroids because it is the steroid all others are compared to. Test has an anabolic to androgenic ratio of 1:1. Steroids that are more androgenic, like halotestin, greatly exceed this ratio in favor of being more androgenic. More mild compounds, such as Anavar, have a higher ratio of anabolic properties. Peer-reviewed literature suggests that SARMs have a ratio in favor of anabolism ranging from 3:1 to 10:1. Synthetic testosterone can convert to estrogen, which causes excessive water retention, and things such as gynecomastia. SARMs were first developed in 1998. SARMs are developed for the same medical reasons as AAS are, and to treat the same conditions, with the goal of fewer side effects. Even though SARMs have been around for well over 2 decades, they remain in the beginning stages. The way they work, as stated earlier, is to bind to the androgen receptor, AR, as steroids do. Growth hormone stimulates cell reproduction and regeneration. Growth hormone is a protein-based peptide hormone that is secreted from the anterior pituitary gland. Medically, HGH is used for children to treat growth disorders. In more recent times, HGH has been used to combat obesity and aging by the growing number of life extension clinics. HGH has been shown to decrease body fat and increase lean body mass, LBM. Additionally, HGH increases bone density, immune function, sexual performance, and skin tone. Insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, is a polypeptide hormone composed of 70 different amino acids. IGF-1, like insulin, growth hormone, and testosterone, has great muscle-building properties. IGF-1 is released in the liver, and just like increased protein synthesis and nitrogen retention, IGF-1 is in part responsible for the anabolic activity of growth hormone. Some believe that IGF-1 can be used in place of HGH and be just as effective. Possible side effects for the non-medical use of IGF-1 are swelling of the hands, Bell's palsy, heart palpitations, and risk of entering into a diabetic coma. Insulin is a peptide hormone that controls the levels of glucose in the body. It is secreted from the pancreas, and in synthetic form, it has legitimate medical usages for people with diabetes. Why would a strength athlete or bodybuilder use insulin? For one, insulin is very anabolic and helps move glucose into muscle cells. Additionally, it increases protein synthesis and regulates sugar metabolism. An overdose of insulin can result in immediate death. Clenbuterol is a popular drug for those wishing to shed body fat, and it is a staple in the cutting regimen of chemically enhanced bodybuilders. Clenbuterol is effective because of its ability as a beta-2 agonist. Clenbuterol stimulates the beta-2 receptors and allows the body to burn and release stored fat. Clenbuterol potentially has some extremely serious side effects, such as enlarged heart, increased blood pressure, increased body temperature, and heart palpitations. Ephedrine can be extremely effective for fat loss because it helps suppress appetite and enhances the sympathetic nervous system, but it can cause some athletes to feel more aggressive. The main side effect of ephedrine is a fast and irregular heartbeat. Other synthetic thyroid hormones such as cytomel, T3, and T4 are commonly used by bodybuilders during their final cutting phases. Unfortunately, these drugs have found their way into other sporting events by athletes wanting to cut fat. For some, cytomel and T4 can be effective. However, by using these compounds for a long duration, users can put their thyroid into a negative feedback loop of using the synthetic version, which inhibits natural production of T3 and T4. Other potential side effects of these drugs include high blood pressure, heart failure, rapid heartbeat, irregular heartbeat, increased appetite accompanied by weight loss, fever, anxiety, irritability, insomnia, emotional changes, muscle weakness, painful breathing, diarrhea, hair loss, and seizures. Synthol is a site enhancement oil that is used to provide localized muscle growth. Think of filling up a water balloon. Synthol works in a similar way, but the balloon is the muscle you are injecting the synthol into, and the water is the synthol oil. Synthol does nothing to actually strengthen or build the muscle. It simply accumulates within the muscle and causes the appearance of a bigger muscle. Besides the risk of infection, synthol injections used for short-term enhancement of muscle risks long-term, painful muscle fibrosis and disfigurement. As with synthol, acetylene is used to cause a one-day localized growth. Originally, this compound was used to treat children with growth deficiencies. Unlike synthol, acetylene is a steroid. Bodybuilders inject synthol into a muscle, and it will cause an inflammatory response that increases muscle size at the site of injection. Stimulants have been around for quite some time. For thousands of years, native culture has ingested certain herbs or plants to stimulate the central nervous system, CNS. Ephedrine was first synthesized in 1887 in Germany. After amphetamines had gained popularity in the United States, the federal government in the 1960s declared these drugs a controlled substance. Stimulants cause increases in motor unit activity and mental alertness. Side effects of taking illegal stimulants such as amphetamines and cocaine include increased blood pressure and tachycardia. Remember, you can be strong and build a great physique without ever taking drugs. Mel Siff said it best in his book, Super Training. The widespread use of steroids and other chemical supplements is frequently an admission that one has run out of training ideas to produce further progress naturally. Our philosophy is this: doing it naturally might take longer, but the result will be healthier, longer lasting, and more satisfactory. All athletes, particularly bodybuilders, benefit from a properly planned recovery period. Far too many of them are not recovering properly, leaving them with less than optimal gains in size and strength. Recovery is the period when our muscles grow and become stronger. The muscle actually begins breaking down during training and is in a catabolic state. Once recovery begins, the body flips the switch, so to speak, and muscle is then in the preferred anabolic state. The ability to recover will vary from individual to individual. Former bench press world record holder Glenn Chabot bench pressed no more than twice a month. Some Olympic lifters train multiple times a day. Some power lifters have made outstanding gains with high-frequency training programs, yet a majority train with lower-frequency models. Overtraining does not only result from training too hard, too often, but also from an accumulation of all of life's stressors. These stressors, aside from hard training, include environmental, psychological, sociological, physiological, biomechanical, and anatomical, structural. You want to minimize stressors outside of training to maximize training results. High-frequency fatigue results in sports in which rapid movement patterns are maintained for more than 60 seconds, and force output losses result from the failure of action potentials. Short-term fatigue is caused by cellular damage. Cellular damage is caused by microtrauma resulting primarily from eccentric contractions. In 1978, scientists divided short-term fatigue into two categories, central and peripheral. The symptoms of central fatigue include diminished motivation, impaired transmission of nerve impulses down the spinal cord, and impaired recruitment of motor neurons. The symptoms of peripheral fatigue include impaired function of peripheral nerves serving independent muscles, impaired transmission of electrical impulses at the neuromuscular junction, and impaired processes of stimulation within the muscle cell. To avoid fatigue, burnout, and overtraining, follow these guidelines. Periodize your training. Use therapeutic modalities at your disposal. Follow a sensible scientific nutritional regimen. Follow a sensible scientific supplementation regimen. Practice lifting and skills with sound technique. Get plenty of rest at night sleeping and between workouts. Take advantage of various psychological modalities that promote recovery. Consuming adequate calories with the right nutrients gets the recovery ball rolling. To maximize performance, it is critical that you know what to eat, when to eat, and how much to eat. Consuming BCAAs and carbohydrates intra-workout can help expedite the recovery process. BCAAs are extremely important for athletes who are approaching the point of overreaching, and for those in a caloric deficit. Post-workout consumption of carbohydrates and whey protein can expedite recovery and anabolism. If an athlete engages in the use of performance-enhancing drugs, also known as PEDs, recovery is accelerated so the workload can be increased. Volume, in particular, can be increased while training with PEDs. Even if an athlete is taking PEDs, the amount of lifts he or she can handle with maximal weights will not increase at the same rate as the ability to do increased volume. This is because steroids help muscle recover, not the central nervous system. Deload periods are a great chance to rest muscles, connective tissues, and most importantly, the central nervous system. Because weights are lighter on deload, this is a great opportunity to practice technique. A deload needs to be viewed as an opportunity for technical reinforcement, not a blow-off week. A simple guideline to follow and a good starting point for deload periods is to use weights with 70% intensity and total volume. Everyone will have a deload at some point. As a trainer, you need to determine how often these deload periods should occur, based on your client's unique makeup. Science and anecdotes both confirm that athletes recover more efficiently while they are active. Elevated blood flow from low-intensity exercise helps minimize the delayed onset of muscle soreness, DOMS, and enhances muscle healing. Things such as walking for 20 to 30 minutes to even dragging light sleds are great for enhancing active recovery. Active recovery can be done at the end of workouts or on days when the athlete is not performing any other training. Use common sense and err on the side of low intensity with active recovery. The Weider system was developed to guide and aid you in developing your own personal system based on your unique recuperative ability, experience, goals, strengths, weaknesses, and guts to go the distance. The Weider principles encompass 3 broad categories that are discussed in greater detail in your textbook. Principles to help you plan your training cycle. Principles to help you arrange your exercises in each workout. Principles to help you perform each exercise. The body emits as much as 70% of its natural growth hormone while sleeping. Sleep has profound effects on muscle growth and your sense of well-being. Hard training athletes should strive for minimally 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep every night. Studies show that sleep can affect the ability to shed body fat, all other variables being equal. Here are tips to optimize sleep. Have a time of inner reflection before bed. Establish a nightly sleeping routine. Exercise earlier in the day. Avoid alcohol, caffeine, or any stimulants before bed. Avoid sleeping pills. If you are large and muscular, get checked out for sleep apnea. Optimize your sleep environment. Keep in mind that periodization and rest are the most important ways to ensure recovery, but other modalities can help you recover too. Some of these can be limited by money, proximity, and time. They include, but are not limited to, the following: chiropractic care, massage, foam rolling, contrast baths, Epsom salt baths, electronic muscle stimulation, EMS, cryotherapy. Recovery is essential for bodybuilding success. Properly managing fatigue can help you become bigger, stronger, and more powerful. Mismanaging fatigue can have detrimental effects both mentally and physically. Remember that exercise stimulates the breakdown of muscle. Recovery is when your muscles become bigger and stronger. To the iron community, nothing is more demoralizing than falling victim to an injury. Those chasing milestone numbers in the gym might have their personal record journeys detoured or abruptly ended by an injury. For bodybuilders, an injury might deliver a fatal blow to one's life on stage. Injuries might carry severe aesthetic implications that could prevent bodybuilders from ascending the competitive ranks. Injuries, however, are largely preventable. Exercise is the catalyst of physiological and psychological change. Exercise in the form of strength training can deliver immense gains in muscular strength and size because it triggers a cascade of neuroendocrine activity. To yield continual progress, one must properly overload his or her muscles. Parameters for overloading muscles include load progression, repetition progression, volume progression, density progression, and exercise progression. Load progression entails the practice of simply adding weight to the bar. Repetition progression is the act of performing more repetitions per set with the same amount of weight previously used. It is another way the bodybuilder could challenge himself and stimulate his muscles to respond. Volume progression is the act of adding more work to the training program. If our bodybuilder does not want to increase the load or repetitions performed per set, he may tack on another set to his squat workout, going from 4 sets of 10 reps to 5 sets of 10 reps. More work is performed, thereby increasing the volume. Density progression entails reducing the amount of time it takes to perform the same volume of work. Say our bodybuilder initially performed squats interspersed with a rest period of 3 minutes, but was a bit short on time during the current workout. He could still use the same load he used in his previous workout, but reduce the rest periods to elicit an improved training effect. Exercise progression entails advancing from one exercise to a different one that is more demanding. Rest and proper nutrition make our bodies and muscles stronger and bigger. If we fail to rest and refuel our bodies, we will make ourselves more vulnerable to injury. Although exercise fortifies bone strength, exercise performed with poor form can slowly chip away at the bone's integrity. Repeatedly performing heavily loaded squats, deadlifts, and overhead presses with less than stellar form might lead to the development of microfractures on the vertebral end plates of the spinal column. Articular cartilage, slivers of collagenous matter that encapsulate the ends of bones and permit seamless articulation, slowly begins to dry up as you age. Improperly performed exercise and poor program design can accelerate the degradation of collagen tissue. Muscle injuries, which can be categorized as either acute or overuse injuries, are commonly sustained by active individuals and athletes. Muscles are at the greatest risk of sustaining injury during an eccentric muscle action. That eccentric muscle action may occur prematurely, when the concentric muscle action is not great enough to resist gravitational and inertial forces. Some specific body regions are at a greater risk of injury for the bodybuilder. Lower back. A tight lower back could inhibit neural drive to the glutes and hamstrings, which work in unison to extend and posteriorly rotate the hips. In the absence of hip extension, the body will try compensating with torso extension. Ultimately, an injury will occur if the bodybuilder is performing a deadlift variation with hundreds of pounds in his or her hands. The spine may contort and forcefully slip into extension as the bodybuilder completes a lift. Knees. Many bodybuilding programs tend to ignore the importance of posterior chain training and hamstring and adductor extensibility. Moreover, bodybuilding splits are designed to induce great amounts of mechanical stress to the muscle from multiple angles, while not focusing on rather important aspects such as mobility, flexibility, and stability training. Ideally, the time and effort spent developing the quadriceps should be equally matched with training the hamstrings and gluteals. If these groups are targeted, you can expect to use heavier poundages on squat and deadlift variations, along with more mass on your wheels. Elbows. The elbow falls casualty to two common conditions: lateral and medial epicondylitis. Lateral epicondylitis occurs from repeated wrist supination and pronation with the elbows extended. Think performing pull-downs and rows with a supinated grip repeatedly. During the eccentric portion of the lift and through the return to the starting position, when the elbows fully extend, the muscles are still tensioned. Barbell presses, which lock the hands in a pronated position, stress the elbows at the end range of extension. Medial epicondylitis stems from the overuse of the wrist flexors. Additionally, performing back squats with too narrow a hand placement on the bar, or routinely performing presses with a close grip, can exasperate the connective tissue of the elbows, contributing to inflammation and pain. Shoulders. The shoulders actually consist of four distinct joints: the scapulothoracic, glenohumeral, acromioclavicular, and sternoclavicular joints. Communally, these joints work to provide smooth articulation of the shoulder. Scapulothoracic joint. Unlike the other three joints just mentioned, the scapulothoracic joint has barely any ligamentous or capsular support, as all its stability derives from the optimal functioning of the 17 muscles that anchor themselves to it. The scapulothoracic joint is critical in keeping the shoulders healthy. Acromioclavicular joint. The acromioclavicular joint, or rotator cuff, is regularly associated with impingement. An impinged shoulder will affect the load you can press horizontally and overhead, and may be accompanied by pain. The joint, or cuff, is encircled by four muscles: the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. To mitigate the risk of injury, ensure that you follow these 13 tips. Tip number 1, check your ego at the door. Tip number 2, pay close attention to your posture. Tip number 3, stretch. Tip number 4, perform self-massage. Tip number 5, hydrate. Tip number 6, learn proper biomechanics of exercise. Tip number 7, don't get too caught up in the numbers you move. Tip number 8, learn how to breathe properly. Tip number 9, don't shy away from bodyweight exercises. Tip number 10, know when to deload. Tip number 11, set priorities and periodize. Tip number 12, focus on enhancing athletic movement patterns as well as increasing muscle size. Tip number 13, warm up extensively. If you adhere to these tips, you'll safeguard yourself against the injuries, both acute and chronic, that bodybuilders face throughout their careers. Remember, bodybuilders must be cognizant that their quest to add muscle doesn't end at a destination. It's a continual journey, and a surefire way to ensure longevity is to take care of the body you have. The straight and narrow path to achieving a championship physique is initiated by many, but few actually succeed. Why? One big reason is that they are not mentally prepared. Mental breakdowns lead to physical mistakes, which can be the beginning of a perpetuating, self-sabotaging cycle. In some sports, such as football, everything boils down to the game. In boxing, it boils down to the fight. Posing on stage is less difficult than is being in a football game or a boxing match. Football and boxing are physically exhausting and mentally demanding, and these force you to face an opponent who wants to physically hurt you. Bodybuilding sounds less mentally demanding than other sports do, yet this is far from the truth. Bodybuilding is a lifestyle that takes a huge mental commitment. No matter how great your genetics might be, they will matter little if your mental game is not top-notch. When you're bringing your A game mentally, the physical will follow. The mind and body work as a team. If you want to be a championship bodybuilder, you can never forget this fact. If you consistently visualize success, you will consistently succeed. What about bodybuilders who are routinely successful? Generally, they envision the great benefits derived via training and diet by painting a mental picture of themselves walking up to be awarded the first place trophy at a contest. For a non-competing college student, the mental picture might be having the best body at spring break in Panama City, whereas an out-of-shape man may just see himself talking to pretty women with confidence. The following are 6 strategies for achieving your goals. Step 1. Define your goal clearly and write it down. Step 2. Devise a series of short-term goals, which will ultimately lead to realizing your main goal. Step 3. Create strategies for your success. Step 4. Visualize yourself succeeding. Step 5. Align your mind, body, and spirit with achievement. Step 6. Give yourself a reward for your accomplishments. As step 3 on the previous slide pointed out, it is important to create strategies for your success. Doing so will allow you to put your thoughts into action, which ultimately leads to success. Here are 12 motivational strategies for bodybuilding success. Set short-term goals in writing. Devise short-term goals that lead you to a long-term goal. Set a training schedule and stick to it. Make pain and fatigue work for you. Challenge yourself in your training. Devise your own personal definition of success. Believe in yourself and foster positive aggression in your training. Keep track of training personal records. Listen to a mentor's advice and apply it to your workouts. Take pictures of yourself to track progress. Build strong self-confidence. Take action. Mind power and successful mental conditioning come only with a sustained and sincere effort. You can't make a wish and simply hope that it comes true. The mind reacts much the same way as the body does. If you train and condition the mind regularly, it will respond with a performance you can always count on and be proud of. Chief ingredients to an effective mind conditioning program include motivation, incentive, visualization, and most important of all, belief. Motivation begins and ends with incentive. You need to know what you want and why you want it. Better symmetry, reduced body fat, or sheer muscle mass are various incentives, and they are part of larger incentives, such as being liked and admired, being a winner or achiever, enjoying success, shaping a personal identity, gaining peer acceptance, and so on. Your emotional state plays a significant role in your overall bodybuilding success or lack of success. The way you feel inside has repercussions for your behavior and performance on the outside. Many factors go into the makeup of a solid emotional base. Some of these include personal life, sex life, family life, job, daily schedule, diet, financial matters, health concerns, and most importantly, self-esteem. For the bodybuilder who wants serious results, the gym is not a social club. You can enjoy seeing your friends when you're at the gym, but always remember that you go to the gym to train. The subconscious mind directly influences your concept of self. The power to achieve and achieve great things is in your subconscious mind. The truth is that you must believe to achieve. In the 1950s, clinical and experimental psychologists proved that the human nervous system is unable to differentiate between a real experience and a vividly imagined detailed experience. This does not mean that you can repeat 10 times a day, "I will be a Mr. Olympia," and it will then happen. That would be a passive experience. For the nervous system to believe it is doing what you are imagining, you must create a vivid mental movie complete with the feelings, sights, sounds, and smells that would accompany the experience in real life. You need active experiences to positively affect your subconscious mind. As we have discussed, visualization is a crucial aspect to mental conditioning for bodybuilding success. Each day, set aside 20 minutes for mental imagery training. Find a dark, comfortable place to lie down and relax your muscles. This place should allow you to forget all the anxieties and troubles of everyday life. Start developing a movie in your head, a movie in which you are the star. Successful visualizations benefit from as many details as possible. This can be of your training at the gym or posing on stage, hitting every pose with perfect precision. If it is training at the gym, envision details of the gym, the look, sounds, and smells. Make it real. This concludes the lecture series for this course. Throughout the course, we have learned about different periodization methods, styles of training, exercises, and why they work. Rather than using this material as a bodybuilding how-to guide, use the information learned in this course as an outline. One major takeaway I want you to have is that there is no one right way to train. Rather, there are many ways to achieve success. Each individual client will be different, but you are now armed with all the ammunition you will need to create individualized programs. Welcome to the wonderful world of bodybuilding. Now go train.